Welcome to USFL Today, the off-season edition, maybe the merger edition. Really hard to say these days exactly what's going on, but you can call it an emergency edition. I'm your host, Angelo Fierce, along with my co-host, Luke Miller. Luke, how's it going?
Going good. I'm, a little exhausted from trying to keep up with all the Twitter comments, but other than that, it's good.
Today's episode is indeed called Tweet of the Week, based solely on your tweet, which seems to have opened a can of worms and poked a couple of people the wrong way. Let's backtrack first and establish some context, though. James tweeted that his information tells him it's going to be 8 USFL teams, 4 XFL teams, and he even seemed to have a sense on which markets are going to survive.
Yeah, and James was, I think, the first that I saw to kind of break that news, but he wasn't the only one. I think it's worth stating that Neil Stratton of Inside, I think it's Inside the League or Inside the Football League, something like that. He also said his sources were sort of telling him the same thing. So, I think credit to James for being the one to kind of drop that bomb out there, but also, it's now multiple sources or multiple people are sort of indicating that this is how things very likely might go.
Much like when the merger talk first kind of started and we weren't sure what to make of it. We had heard enough whispers to get the sense that it was real. I'm hearing enough of these whispers to get the sense that even if it's not exact down to the team, I get a sense that this is kind of the structure that we're going to be looking at, Luke. And building off of what James tweeted out there, which got everybody going, you put out a tweet yesterday, right around this time of day, actually. Here it is. I'll pull it up. And it says, all right, USFL and XFL fam, how are we feeling about the new league? And there you have a graphic with each of the 12 teams, the 8 and the reported 4 XFL teams. And look at this activity on this tweet, Luke. I have not had a tweet like this that's had activity. 32,000 impressions, 290 something likes, 62 retweets, and nearly 130 comments. Luke, what is it about this particular tweet that got everybody going?
Well, it's funny because when I posted it, I was, again, kind of piggybacking off of what James reported, but, trying to put it into a visual, more of a visual guy myself. So, I, with my incredible graphic design skills, whip that up real quick and put it out there. And, I thought that it would get some traction, just, people saying, oh, yeah, like it looks exciting, or, oh, I'm good with it, or I wish my team was in, or whatever. But and it was funny because when I first posted it, Twitter it wasn't down, but it was like having some issues where like people weren't really getting notifications, and like so people weren't really seeing things.
Yeah, it was acting
so then I was
wonky
like,
yesterday. That's right.
Yeah, so then I was like, oh well, I guess I don't think anybody's really gonna do much with it because people aren't really seeing things on Twitter right now. But sure enough, like later that night, it just ended up taking off like wildfire. And I was out with some friends and my wife, and like every time I would look at my phone, I had like 30 new notifications from people just commenting, liking, disliking, retweeting. And it certainly, I think, I don't know, maybe there were some people that they didn't see James's tweet and this was the first, maybe they heard of this, because I saw some people that commented with a high degree of surprise.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely kind of, I think especially more on the XFL fan side, struck a little bit of a nerve to have them see all 8 USFL teams and only a couple XFL teams potentially in the mix.
Yeah, most definitely not the kind of news that a hardcore XFL fan wanted to hear out of this merger. And now I said it, and a couple of other people have been saying it. This seems this seems less of a merger now and more of an absorption at this point. And I'm getting the feeling, Luke, that the USFL is using these 4 XFL teams that they're going to keep afloat, if reports are accurate, of course. They're going to use these 4 as a sort of de facto expansion. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a rebrand of at least 2 or 3 of those remaining 4 teams into something more USFL familiar.
Yeah, I think one thing that needs said, because I've gotten some pushback. Well, I've got a lot of pushback from a lot of different things. But one thing that I think some people have have started to kind of just say is, well, all of this is just purely speculation, and until the official word comes out from the league, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. And obviously, there is a small degree of truth to that, in the sense that what we're going off of isn't based on official documentation or pronouncements from the league or something like that. So there is at least a measure of speculation involved. But I think it's worth bearing. This is something I've tried to remind people over and over, is there's a difference between pure speculation, where you're just pulling stuff off the top of your head and just saying, well, what if they did this? What if they did that? And speculation that's based upon multiple legitimate, well-sourced reports from different outlets. And so I think at this point, again, nothing's been made official yet. And we're not going to really probably know anything official until the league comes out with a statement, because they're in the middle of the legal process. If things are, it's kind of the loose lips sinks ships kind of thing, right?
Sure.
Like, people have, I'm sure, been very instructed to be very tight-lipped for the most part, and to be very careful about what they say until, it gets very close to, or until the actual legal process is kind of behind them. But that being said, again, we do have multiple, I think, we'll put it this way: where there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Correct.
And I think we have lots of signs indicating, again, some of it not speculation, right? I mean, it's not speculation that the XFL has let go serious employees, right, at the
And
high
that's
level.
that's where I was just about to start heading this conversation, Luke. You went right into it, which is, when you look around at what's been going on in the last 4 weeks since the intent to merge has been announced, and since it leaked before that, it's been nothing but XFL admins getting let go of their positions. You haven't seen USFL people get let go, other than coaching moves, but those don't count. That's going to happen anyway. We're talking about people running the show. Looks like some of that duplication that may exist in positions is already being sort of defragged, Luke.
Right. And that's not speculation, right? Like, that is confirmed.
That's real.
It's also confirmed at this point that, we know the XFL lost a significant amount of money in year one. We know it's at least 60 million. That's what they would say. But I've heard from multiple people with multiple different sources that would indicate that that number was really actually higher. How much higher, we don't maybe fully know, or at least I don't know. But at a minimum, they lost 60 million, but likely several million more than that. Whereas, again, we haven't seen the USFL financials, but the USFL, and both in terms of Fox and NBC, have both come out and said this was a profitable venture for us thus far. And we have, no reason to believe that that is not true. And based on the success that, they had with, marketers and getting ad space bought, and the limited costs of the hub, doesn't seem far-fetched to think that it was profitable. So either way, it's concrete that, fact that we know that the XFL was in a position where they were acquiring losses very rapidly, whereas the USFL was not, right? We also know that the USFL confirmed, regardless of what happens with this merger, they're playing another season, right? That's a done deal. The XFL, as far as I know, has not come out and said the same. I have not been able to find any confirmation from the XFL that would indicate, if this falls through, they're going to move forward with another year, kind of business as usual. Now, of course, they've kind of said business as usual, but they've let go significant employees. On the roster side of things, the USFL, I mean, again, if you were just somehow completely oblivious to the merger news, if you were just tracking like roster movement and things that were happening in the offseason, you would have zero clue that anything was going on with the USFL. I mean, nothing has changed from last year, right?
Right.
For all 8 teams. And that's not true for the XFL, right? Like, they had guys sign these letters of intent, but a letter of intent is not a contract, right? A letter of intent is me saying, yeah, I would like to play in your league if you offer me a contract. But no, it doesn't seem like any contracts are being offered or anybody's being officially signed to the league.
Not
right?
anybody new anyway.
Right. So you put all and I could keep going, right? So, but you put all of those pieces of the puzzle together, and it seems pretty clear who's driving the ship at this point. And the fact of the matter is, we've talked about this before, but if the XFL was going to have another season and this fell through, like, they've got a couple months to pull it off at this point, right? Like they're less than 4 months away now. And not that it would maybe be impossible, but what would happen with Vegas, right?
Right.
Like uh, there's just all these kind of things that they would have to figure out that it seems like they've kind of tabled on the assumption that this is what's next for them, or sort of, I don't know. I don't want to say their only hope, because again, I'm not in their
Well,
boardroom with their meetings, but all signs would sort of indicate that when you're letting go of staff, you're not adding players. You're pretty much putting a freeze on bringing in new players and making
yeah,
other changes, unless they're, again, sort of
I
shedding people.
I feel like
I mean,
the
how else are you supposed to interpret that?
I feel like the XFL's eggs are now in the merger basket.
Yeah.
And if for some reason, Luke, should this merger not consummate for whatever obstacle may present itself, I feel like you're going to hear the XFL suspend operations
Yeah.
for 2024 before they try to then scramble around and field a season for next year if they don't have a new home for Vegas and have some of those other positions that they've let people go filled, or are they making people double up on their responsibilities at the league office? Either way, it does not make for what could be a bad situation when and if and when the government finally goes through their review and either gives this the stamp of approval or gives it the thumbs down.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's going to be enough time for, say, the XFL, if they were to hear this news, say in November, hey, the government's not allowing your merger. Holy crap. Now we have 2 months to get our stuff together.
Yeah.
I feel like that could create a scramble situation, which they may not be intending to participate in. And if this merger doesn't go through, I feel like you might not see those 4 teams next year either, Luke.
Yeah. And I think that it reminds me a lot of when the XFL was in discussions with the CFL, right? And I don't know, again, this is speculation in terms of their motivation and their intent, but it seems like from early on, the XFL has been very open to the thought of linking arms with someone else, right? Like one of their first moves when they came into existence, instead of saying, like, let's build our league, let's make this happen, it was, let's contact the CFL and maybe see if there's a way we could kind of make this work together. Right. And, for a period of time, it seemed like that was really going somewhere, and that they were on the cusp of maybe coming to some kind of agreement or figuring something out. And obviously, eventually that fell through. And then they suspended, because originally the rumor or the plan was they were going to play in 22. But because they put some of the eggs in kind of that CFL basket and put things on hold, by the time that CFL thing fell through, it was too late for them to get a 2022 season up and running. So then they had to push it back to 2023. And so kind of very similar to what you're saying, I think if this merger at this point wasn't able to go through, and, again, it's probably going to be at least a week until we find that out. I mean, I think it's going to be close to the end of the month longer at minimum. So you're looking at, again, November, basically. So you've got, again, 3 months to figure out what next season is going to look like, again, which means securing a new location and venue for one of your teams. I mean, so yeah, like you said, I don't know if it would be feasible to even try and pull it off in 2024 if this falls apart. So again, all signs, at least as far as and again, not based on speculation, but based on what the leagues are actually doing, all signs would seem to indicate that the XFL is really banking on this working out.
Yeah. And the USFL, on the other hand, is operating as if there is no merger happening at the moment, because you don't know what the outcome could be. And if on the other side of that announcement in November, it's thumbs up from the government, great. Let's absorb those 4 teams and turn this into a 12-team league. And if it's thumbs down from the government, it's like, well, that's okay. We're kicking off April 13th or 14th or whatever it's going to be with our 8 teams that we have, and perhaps they unveil just an additional hub or something for 2024. But if it's going to be 12 teams, as we talked about, Luke, it's definitely going to be more hubs. And as I'm looking over the chatter on your tweet, hubs really seems to be the thing that is irking the people that are not, sort of USFL family, so to speak. It really bugs them. And I got to tell you, man, I'm scratching my head. I know why they don't like hubs, but I'm scratching my head as to why they can't seem to understand it's not a permanent solution, that they are evolving from hubs. Where's that disconnect? Help me out.
Yeah, I wish I knew, because I'm not sure I fully understand either myself. But um, I think there's some fear on the XFL side that some of the teams maybe that were previously in market might be sent back to a hub in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. We really don't know yet. I mean, we know that obviously Birmingham has a venue secured, Memphis has a venue secured, and Canton has a venue secured on the USFL side of things. On the XFL side of things, I mean, in theory, as far as I understand it, outside of Vegas, everybody sort of had a venue secured. And I think Houston was the only one that maybe kind of didn't, but they seemed to have something that was, pretty much either in the works or essentially secured at this point. So as far as, I think, again, if the USFL is kind of running the ship, which it very much seems to be the case that it is and will be, there will be hubs of some variety. But we just don't know yet, who will be paired up where, or, if there will be 6 hubs with 2 teams apiece, or if there'll be, 4 teams will be in their home market by themselves. And then, there'll be 4 other hubs where it's 2 teams apiece or something like that. We just don't really know. But all that to say, I think there is some fear from some XFL fans. Like I saw some people, for example, talking about DC and being like, oh man, like I'm going to be, livid if they take DC out of DC and they put them in a hub, somewhere else or whatnot. So I think that's part of it, which again, like I get that. I think what I don't, like you said, what I don't get is the fact that people don't understand that this isn't the long-term plan, right? Like if you listen to Daryl Johnson, if you just think about what the league is trying to do, obviously the plan is not, well, let's just have a permanent hub model, right? The plan is, let's grow in a way that's sustainable. And I mean, frankly, I kind of had this argument with some XFL fans on Twitter, but I think it kind of blows my mind that people want to make such a big deal about hubs and attendance and whatnot, because if you watched XFL games last year, outside of a couple teams, the attendance was very poor.
Just as paltry. I mean, it's not like they had, 25,000 every week somewhere.
Right.
A couple of locations, of course. We're not going to downplay St. Louis's impact or even San Antonio's early season crowds. They definitely showed that they can draw people. That's not the question, right?
Yeah. And I think if you look at it, I think from the XFL side of thing, if I was going to maybe, sort of concede a point, I think you can concede the argument that, well, maybe if you keep the teams in hubs for multiple years, by the time those teams get to market, are they really going to be able to kind of build and gain traction? And are people going to be interested because, well, I'm a Houston fan. I mean, the Houston team's been away for 3 years. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. We just don't really know, right? I'm with you. I'm not necessarily buying it that just because,
I need to interject.
Like if I was a Birmingham,
I need to interject on that. Okay.
Interject.
Okay.
You're in New Jersey, and
I'm in New Jersey, right?
Other places for multiple years.
So I'm in New Jersey. The team has not played here. Now it's going to be 2 years in the books, a third year where they're most likely not going to be in New Jersey next year. And many people don't understand that they even exist or that they're playing because of the fact that there's no home games, there's no marketing, there's no anything like that locally other than, the pregame show and a couple mentions here and there on Fox 5 News by my friend Tina Servasio, who actually gives them a little bit of play every now and then on Sports Extra. But other than that, no one else in the market is talking about them. However, Luke, I don't care if it's year 3, 4, 5. The minute you put a team into the market, Jersey, Philly, any of them, the fans are going to come and check it out. Then it's up to the product to hold them after that. And no one's going to give a crap if they were playing in Canton and Alabama for the last 3 years, because to those new fans that have just latched on, it's year 1. Do you care if you discover a band that's new to you that they already got 3 albums out? You don't care, right? You're happy with the new album, and then you're going to go back and learn more about them and then stick with them moving forward if you like what you see. It's the exact same thing here. So the idea that, well, the Gamblers haven't been playing in Houston for the last 3 or 4 years means they're going to be irrelevant when they finally show up is a crock.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I mean, I feel the same way. Like if Birmingham, if the tables were turned and Birmingham had been playing in Canton for the last 2 years, and they just showed up in Birmingham, next year or the year after or whatever, like
Yeah.
I'd be there. And yeah, maybe I would have been disappointed that it took that long or whatever. But like at that point, I'm not gonna hold it against the league and be like, well, I'm on principle, I can't support this
Yeah,
team
I'm not
because
coming now because you didn't play here for the first 3 years. Get out of
right.
here with that.
But I think, in my opinion, I think the USFL, and again, I could offer some critiques. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I think the USFL has done everything perfect because they haven't, and I've critiqued them in other ways and other times. But I do think you are seeing the USFL continue once they kind of like are in a market and they're like, this is a place that we're in and we're going to be, right? You're seeing them start to kind of slowly build out that on the ground organic marketing and building a community of fans, right? I think Memphis is a really good example of that. They weren't in Memphis in year one at all, didn't even have a team.
Right.
Year two, they move a team to Memphis. And, even just now in the offseason, I saw actually tomorrow they're having a select a seat.
Right. Pick your seat
at the
for
yeah. Where it's like, come in, you can tour the locker room, you can tour the stadium, meet players, sign autographs, giveaways, like all this kind of stuff for season ticket holders. And they have like an hour that's just open to the public. So I think the USFL has made it clear that like once they're kind of in a market to stay, like then they are taking steps to try and sort of build out the fan base
absolutely
in that market. On the flip side, and I think again you see that pay off in the terms of Memphis had really good attendance this year. Birmingham, I don't think their attendance grew from year one to year two like they wanted it to. I think there are reasons for that, and we'll say that for another podcast. But I think they still had, obviously, they have a really strong, vocal, core group of fans in the city. And so I think, and even in a place like Canton, like where you don't even necessarily have a team, but they've built a really strong connection with that community there. And I think, whether they move a team to Canton or continue to have games played in Canton or just play the championship Canton or whatever the case may be, like there's always going to be, I think, a special kind of connection with the USFL there. So all that to say, I think, that to me goes to show that even if these teams are in hubs for a period of time, once they're in market and once the USFL is committed to them being in market, like you can build out a fan base, right? Whereas if you see what the XFL did, where they did the hub model where they had all the teams in one location,
right?
And then they just flew them out for a game and then they flew them back, but there wasn't really otherwise maybe as much sort of on the ground, appearances by players. I mean, I know the XFL did some of those things. I don't want to.
They did some, yeah. They definitely did some.
And in some ways, in terms of like social media and some marketing stuff, like the XFL has done, more than USFL. But that being said, again, Vegas averaged 6,000 fans at their games, right? I think Orlando averaged like 8,000, right? And I'm just like, again, this is the whole argument for the hub model, right? At what point is it worth blowing money left and right to have a team in a stadium just to have a couple thousand people there versus having them in a hub where you're saving literally millions and millions of dollars? And yeah, there's only maybe 1,000 people in the crowd as opposed to 6,000. I mean,
but yeah. And that's where, Luke, it's being lost on people that the non-home market hub team is there to help support build the hub that is open. So Detroit, for example, was open last year, sharing it with Philly. Philly was there to help absorb costs, to keep it down, to average things out between two teams instead of only one team bearing the brunt of all the expenses, so to speak, by the league. And that was the whole purpose of the hubs. And they're going to grow everybody out of these hubs eventually. We're seeing it happen where they went from, one hub to, 3 and 4 cities. And it's going to continue to grow. And they will eventually be in all 8. But, talking about the hubs, I want to use the projected or speculated absorption of the four teams, because I feel like they play very heavily into the hub strategy of the USFL. And that's another thing that the XFL guys losing their minds a little bit here, the fans, when in fact, I feel like the teams that are being reportedly absorbed bring in a strong possibility to actually be hubs. DC, the Defenders, who I feel could be rebranded as the Federals, very easily could host Philadelphia and or New Jersey in a hub there and be the Northeast place to play. Arlington, why couldn't Arlington host Houston and San Antonio, or San Antonio host Houston and Arlington? These things are all very possible, in addition to the existing hubs that the USFL already had in place, Luke.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, I think there's some question about the Houston situation because, Houston potentially has a stadium. I'm not sure where things currently stand on that. But if it's not too late, the league could easily back out of securing a location in Houston and then put, let's say, Houston in Arlington and put the New Orleans Breakers in San Antonio, or vice versa. Put the Breakers in Arlington and put, the Gamblers down in San Antonio, and continue to use the stadiums that have been used in Arlington and San Antonio and have them operate as a hub. And like you said, do the same thing for DC. I mean, certainly, obviously, they're not going to remove St. Louis out of St. Louis, right?
And why
St.
would
Louis
they?
can serve as a hub for them and somebody else. So I don't think that I mean, obviously, I guess it's a possibility that one or multiple of these XFL teams could end up in a hub somewhere. But I think certainly more. I mean, the reason these teams are being kept, let's be honest, the reason these four teams are being kept are because they're the four teams that have basically the strongest fan bases and attendance and, brand.
They got stadiums, dude.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only other team that I think had maybe somewhat similar following to some of these was Seattle, but Seattle's on the island when you're looking at a map and looking at these 12 teams, right? And so unfortunately for them, that kind of cost them. But if you kind of take them out of the picture, well, you're definitely not keeping Vegas or Orlando around, right? And so at that point, you've kind of got the that kind of narrows it down to the four teams that are worth keeping around because of the fan bases that they've built and the stadiums they have and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I don't think that it's very likely, that these teams end up as a hub team in another city. And at that point, you got to wonder, if that happened, would they just rebrand the team altogether to kind of break ties with, let's just pretend that DC wasn't in DC. Well, again, like you said, do they rebrand them as the Federals to kind of cut ties with that past? And, then when the Federals do end up in DC, is it like, okay, well, this is our first year on the ground here, so it's like, I don't know. I mean, that is speculation, but I think, go ahead.
No, I mean, I kind of understand what you're saying, but, the reality is that, like, for example, you talk about rebranding. With the super success that St. Louis had, I feel like that's the one team that is probably would be rebranded. Let's put it that way. But I feel like when I'm looking at them right now, I'm looking at the logo.
There's not like a USFL St. Louis historic brand or something like that.
Right, exactly. Whereas with the other three places, here's where my thoughts are, right? I look at the Defenders and the Renegades logo, and I get what they went for with the Defenders having the colors of DC and the star in the middle there, which is representative of the DC flag. But then I look at the Renegades logo, and it looks like the D from DC's logo with a line through it.
Yeah.
So I feel like both of those could maybe be spruced up, but that's why I feel like they're candidates for rebranding. I also feel like San Antonio is a great candidate to be rebranded if they are kept in the new league, because that name Brahmas is completely tied into the Rock. I think I said this to you offline in a text, which is keeping the Brahmas in the new league moving forward is almost like buying a car from someone and leaving their vanity plate on it after you drive off. There's no reason for the USFL to keep the name Brahmas in a city like San Antonio, where they actually have history, and they could go with gunslingers if they can steal that name away or buy the name rather from the IFL team.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, the Brahmas especially, just like I get that some people like it and they think it's cool and unique. Like I get all that, right? And I'm not saying that it's not, but at some point you want a consistent brand, right? For all your teams. You don't want this kind of hodgepodge. Well, this is the vestiges of the Rock's personality that's been left over. And then here's all these historic USFL teams, so it's just like at some point, unless The Rock is really going to be heavily involved and continue to kind of be the face of this, which, doesn't seem very likely the way things are trending. I mean, I could see him maybe still kind of doing some promotion for the league or, depending on how much skin he has in the game. But at some point, it's just like, I don't think this is going to be built around I don't think this is going to be built around The Rock's personality anymore. And if it's not, then it's kind of like, well, the whole like name Brahmas was again just sort of part of growing The Rock's brand. And so I don't know. I'm kind of with you on that one. Again, I don't have any skin in the game in the sense that I don't live in San Antonio. I didn't go to Brahmas games last year and fall in love with the name or whatever.
Right.
I don't know how many people actually did, but like you said, there is a historic USFL property there. Even if let's just pretend that they couldn't for whatever reason get the gunslingers, rights from the arena team that currently exists. Like there's other things that could fit, right? Other historic USFL brands that could fit, whether it's the Outlaws, the Wranglers, like
true.
Shoot, I mean, I even saw somebody who said, "Oh, well, if you're not going to keep the Houston Roughnecks, you could just change to the San Antonio Roughnecks. Like that's better and more kind of generic, so to speak, than the Brahmas." I don't know that I would love that, but I mean, I could. But the point being, like, there's some options there. If you wanted to kind of move away from the Brahma name, which I don't know. It just doesn't seem to fit with the, again, assuming you're going to have 8 USFL teams and this essentially be a continued USFL league, it just doesn't really fit. And I get the argument that, well, you want to be careful about just kind of constantly rebranding because there's something to be said for stability. But at some point, like the XFL is gone. Like if
exactly,
you're
introducing 4 new teams in 1 year. And again, let's talk about the fact, Luke, that not everybody's up to, just because we're all up to speed on this spring football happening, not everybody else is. So next year, there's going to be new people's eyes opening up to the fact that there's this league that now has 12 teams. And if those names are still from the previous league, it could create confusion. But yet again, a lot of people didn't have an awareness of the XFL, didn't have an awareness of the USFL through the first couple of seasons. And that's okay. And that's what allows a league like this to do what we're talking about, which is to grab 4 teams from another league and rebrand all 4 of them in one fell swoop and have a 12-team entity to present to whoever the new audience is going to be next year, whether it's going to be USFL fans, a combination of them with XFL fans, and also a smattering of new people who are just discovering spring football.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I think the Battlehawks, that's one where it doesn't really fit, but you don't
mess with that.
Can you risk messing with that with the the sort of following that it has? I'm not sure that you can.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a dangerous move. But I don't know. People in St. Louis are crazy to have a football team of their own. And so I don't know. There's also maybe the argument that they'll support it no matter what, but that's a risk you're taking. But yeah, I mean, as far as the other 3 goes, I mean, even I don't think we've talked about this yet, right? Like even the Arlington Renegades. I mean, there's a historic Renegades property that the USFL had, right? The Orlando Renegades. And
yeah.
So, I mean,
ironically, the Federals franchise, when they moved down to Orlando, they flipped to the Orlando Renegades. And it's a pretty cool color scheme: little red, little white, little blue. It's got like a tomahawk on the helmet. I used to like their logo.
Yeah, you could keep the name.
Yeah,
but make the logo, the branding, the history, and all that kind of more USFL centric than XFL centric.
Great point. It's already a USFL name from the archives, so you're just you're flipping the identity of the team, but not the name of the team. And I kind of like that, because then if you were into them in Arlington last year, then you still have your team with the same name, even just a different look.
Right. And there wasn't, there's not like a historic XFL USFL team in Dallas, right? So it's not like, it's not like, well, we got to choose between the, Texas or Dallas, fill in the blank. and the Renegades. I mean, it kind of works. It kind of makes sense to go with Renegades.
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. And I think that again, for a purely speculative conversation, we really covered a lot of ground, all based on the fact that James was able to unearth that info first, and then you put out a tweet of a graphic which just ignited I bet you there's like another 50 comments on your tweet just in this time we've been spending talking.
I think so. Yeah, I pulled it up a second ago. I'm up to almost 41,500 impressions, and yeah, I think we're still going strong with the comments. So
awesome. I wish I knew what the sauce was to a tweet which would get people's attention the way that one did, because I don't think I've ever seen a tweet, in our sphere, quite catch fire like that.
yeah, well, I have to apologize to you and James and the ref and Zach and Ducky and maybe one or two other people, because I tagged you all in the photo because I was like, how are we all feeling? But then it just exploded. So then I was getting texts from like you and those guys, like all saying like, man, like I had to turn the notifications off because my phone was just blowing up from all these comments.
Yeah, I woke up to like 68 notifications or something like that on the Twitter, and I knew what they were all going to be related to, and still pretty funny. And I really did really did enjoy the way that got the ball rolling. But the other thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap it up, still related to your tweet. All right, USFL and XFL fam, I don't know if we're going to be fam with the XFL guys with the way that they're acting.
Yeah, I think right now maybe this is naive, but my hope is that once the dust kind of settles and it's like, hey, we have one spring football league, that's it. It's this or bust. That people will eventually sort of come around and kind of just, whether they like it or not initially, kind of accept that like this is what it is, and either I'm going to support it or not. And I think there'll certainly probably be some holdouts who, I was a huge Sea Dragons fan and they took the Sea Dragons from me, so I'm not going to support the league or whatever. And that, okay, that's fine. Yeah. But I'm hoping that at least the majority of kind of XFL fans maybe sort of come back around and continue to follow the league. And I think the hope is that, like you alluded to earlier, right, that a merged league, there's more people out there that don't know about and don't follow these leagues than there are that do, right? And so I think the hope is that a merged league brings more new people into the fold, even if it risks, ostracizing or offending some former fans from one or the other.
It's going to have greater reach. The league is going to have 33% greater reach just in the amount of cities that it's adding. And that's not counting the size of those markets that it plans to add, because that also expands or, kind of contracts the reach depending on which cities end up sticking around. But when you're adding a DC, which is a top 4 market, right, and you're adding a Dallas potentially, which is, also in the top 10 there, and Houston is also in the top 5, I believe, in market size now. You're talking about adding major markets, and that's what's missing when people are only allowing their allegiances to determine their judgment of this decision. You got to understand that cracking into those markets for just a single league is only going to help the ratings and help the exposure for whatever the new spring football league is. So whatever it's going to be called next year. And personally, my gut tells me it's still going to be called the USFL, Luke. I don't care what they copyrighted last week with the USFL. They also copyrighted Dallas Stallions last year, and we saw what that got us. So I'm not buying into all these trademarks meaning a whole hell of a lot other than they're just locking up stuff so no one else can have it.
Yeah, at some point, if the USFL brass is in charge, all the USFL teams are surviving. Like we said, I mean, at some point it begins to feel much more like a acquisition than a merger. And at that point, why change the name? I mean, just call it what it is, right? Again, it remains to be seen if that's a concession, maybe the XFL side are willing to make, but who knows how much of a say they'll have. I mean, again, supposedly it's a 50-50 merger, but it
sure don't look like it.
Doesn't feel like that.
No. Yeah. And I think that's what's getting the boiling the blood of the XFL fan right now. When you think about it, Luke, right? The USFL had the head start. They had the season already going on. And the XFL fans watched their league become announced, be formed, and then kick off during the USFL second year. So they had like a 2-year ramp up to get excited, or a year and a half ramp up to get excited about their product. And it's gone after only one season, essentially after only 12 weeks. So I could see why they're upset, especially if they got, they were all in and they were psyched about their teams in whichever city. But at some stage now it becomes, do you like football enough to follow it in the spring, no matter what it's called and who's running it?
Yep.
And it doesn't mean you have to like it. You could not watch it.
Right. Or do you only care about the number of people in the stands that you can look at and don't actually care about the football that's on the field?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the factor is there that matters so much to people, but that might be for another podcast as well. But that pretty much brings us full circle on this one, Luke. Good job by you starting the fire. And I'm glad we were able to have this further, deeper conversation about what could very well be what the new USFL or the new Spring Football League or whatever the hell they're going to call it is going to look like, man.
Yeah, we got to cut the conversation short so we can get back to replying to people on Twitter.
Yeah, we got to go read all the angry responses to why San Diego is definitely going to have a team next year.
Yeah.
We'll leave the irrationality. Next week's episode will be called delusional irrationality.
Yeah, there you go. We're like bad tweets of the week.
XFL tweets of the week. I think we should do that next week. How about that?
Yeah.
We'll get a good laugh out of those. I'll get a laugh track and everything for next week's show.
There you go.
That is it for this week's edition of what is still called for now USFL Today. I'm Angelo Fioris. That is Luke Miller. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you follow us both on Twitter/X. But that's it for now. Take it easy.